Morning, good afternoon, and possibly good evening to all of you joining us today. A very warm welcome from London. I'm Nabil, your one of the customer success managers here at DeepCrawl, and I have the pleasure today to show you a bit to show you basically the interaction we've been working on for the past few months, and that is the Search Console integration. Um, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, and apologies, really sincere apologies for what happened yesterday. We had to reschedule and push it back by 24 hours. Unfortunately, there was a slight hiccup with GoToWebinar's servers, which essentially forced us to push it back a little by a little bit. So apologies about that again. One thing to mention, I have noticed a few familiar names. Hi to all of you who I've worked with before, but I will mention that if for those of you who might have questions at the end, you can either send them to me directly, or you can ask them as we go along during the in the question section, and we'll go through these at the end. What we'll also do is at the end of this webinar send everyone a few extra pieces of information on the integration, as well as a link to this recorded webinar, so that you can always go back into the video and see some of the use cases that we will have presented today. And this actually brings me to basically the structure of this webinar. So one of the things, the first thing we'll do is take a look at the integration itself. What is the advanced Google Search Console integration, if not just a bunch of words that sound great? We'll also then take a look at setting up the crawl, how you can exactly set up a crawl with the integration. Then we will take a look at some of the key new reports that we've brought forward with the integration itself. And then finally, and this is where I want to focus a bit more of our time here today, we'll take a look at some of the use cases, how exactly you can take advantage of the integration. It's not just about pulling extra data, but it's also about understanding how you can generate some actionable data using DeepCrawl. So first things first, the integration itself. What is it? It's roughly 17 new reports. I'll focus on a few of the most important ones in just a bit. It's also bringing in data that's essentially unique to DeepCrawl, and that is click-through rates, impressions, ranking, country, and more, quite importantly, device as well, which is somewhere where we can actually differentiate ourselves. It's giving you essentially a much more in-depth look at your site. It's also, and the way we do that is essentially because it's our sixth source, giving you a much fuller crawl. And it doesn't stop there. We essentially have no limits whatsoever, which is a feat that even Search Console you wouldn't be able to do even with Search Console itself. They limit you, the platform itself limits you to 1,000 lines, whereas DeepCrawl's API integration was able to sort of go bypass that and give you an unlimited amount of data. It's a free integration for those of you who are wondering. You can take advantage of it, starting today. Essentially, it won't cost you any more credits. The way our system works is that whether or not a URL was found once or 3 or 6 times, we still crawl it just a one time, and as a result, it won't count against your credit usage. Overall, and this is a theme that I'm going to cover throughout this webinar, is what this does is it monitors your most important pages. These are your pages that, as you might have gathered by now, are either driving organic traffic or they're driving some impressions on Google. So we can essentially guarantee that these are your index pages. How will we do this, and in what sense are we translating this data? So as I said, there's 17 reports. A handful of them are here, and I'll go in depth into some of these later on when I cover some use cases. But some of the ones that we can highlight here are your indexable pages without search impressions. These are essentially pages that, because we're able to gather quite a limitless amount of data going back up to 60 days, this is really some of the pages you're going to want to take a bit, a bit of a deeper look and understand why they're not gathering any impressions whatsoever. They're indexable pages with search impressions, so these are pages that are doing quite well. But we also take a look at some non-indexable pages that are driving impressions. Maybe you can have a further understanding on as to why these non-indexable pages, or these pages which you thought were non-indexable, are still driving impressions. Maybe it's a canonicalization gone wrong, or maybe you want to add a no index tag as well. Whatever it is, they'll be flagged there, and I'll show you an example later on. It's also your mobile and AMP pages that are showing search impressions. So these are the ones that are configured quite well. But equally so, there might be some mobile pages that are generating desktop clicks. So maybe try to understand what's happening there. And finally, your desktop pages, likewise, that are generating mobile search clicks. Maybe something's wrong with the configuration. It's also new graphs, and for that I'd like to jump into the app right now and sort of show you some of these new graphs. Some of them are here at the bottom of your dashboard, showing you, for example, here what is the percentage of pages that have search impressions in a very visual way versus the pages that don't have any search impressions. Again, based on the indexable pages we have. Bear in mind, as you can do with essentially all of our graphs, you can download them in various formats. And you can always minimize them if you'd like to as well. We've got your search by clicks, and this again is an interactive graph that'll show you essentially which of your pages are driving traffic from which device as well. Again, we're able to differentiate desktop, mobile, and tablet sources as well. And bear in mind, you can always click on each of these to go and see what these pages are. They're quite easy to digest, just like this. When looking at them, but you also want to action on them, and you can do so by clicking on them. Another graph we've introduced, and this is on the page level, so you can see I'll just scroll up here. This is on the URL level view. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll notice that we've brought in these extra graphs also to show you, again, both the representation with regards to clicks, but also impressions, and also breaking that down by device as well. So again, quite useful data over here. Now, how do we set up a crawl? I will now go back into the app as well to show you how to do that. It's very straightforward. So if you have experience with DeepCrawl, you can quite simply throw in your site's URL in here, do a domain mapping. Now, what DeepCrawl does is, and you'll notice this sometimes as well, as some sites essentially block bots from accessing your site. You can still bypass this. It might be a matter of whitelisting afterwards, and this is a good exercise and something to bear in mind, because I know sometimes people see NA and they think that we can't go beyond that because the save and continue button is grayed out. You can always select a protocol and move forward from there, which is what I'm going to do here with HTTPS and www. I'm essentially going to do a website and Search Console crawl. What I can see right away is, so I've obviously already configured my Search Console account, but what you can always do is quite simply do it from here. Just click the Add a Google account. It'll redirect you to a Google hosted page. Select the profile of your choice or the account of your choice, and then you'll be able to select the different domains that you have under that account. In my case, I just have the DeepCrawl account. I've selected it. I can always configure this further depending on the country of choice. So if I'm interested in only looking at customers that have come into my site from a specific country, I can do that. Otherwise, as will be the case for most of you, if your interest is really to get as much information as possible or as much data, you'll select worldwide. The date range, we can either select between 10 and 60 days or ask us to go and pick out all available data. Let's set it as such here. And then what you can do is select the search type. Obviously, by default, it's a web search where we identify impressions and clicks from Google.com in the defaulted web column. Or if you'd like to try to take a look at some of the traffic and impressions that you're getting through an image crawl or through a video crawl, you can do this as well. These are features that are currently being developed, and I'll explain a bit more about them during the demo. But some of these are in development and about 2 weeks away from being fully released. Under minimum clicks, the reason why we've defaulted to 0 is because, well, some of your links, as you may have noticed, won't always have organic traffic, but they'll definitely have impressions. So that means they'll definitely be seen by certain users on Google, but they might not be generating some traffic to your site. And finally, what we have here, and this is also a different use case that I'll try to explain a bit more, but you can set an include and exclude based on traffic coming into your site or showing impressions to your pages, depending on the keywords that are used during when searching for certain queries. Now, let's take a look at some of the use cases. One of the reports I highlighted in one of my first slides was the ability to pick out, for example, mobile pages that were coming in through desktop searches, or likewise, vice versa, desktop searches that were coming in. Sorry, desktop impressions and clicks that were coming in through mobile searches. This is actually the topic that was the topic of one of the questions during the July 7th Webmaster Central Hangouts, where John Mueller sort of explains, essentially explains, sorry, that what may be happening here is that your pages aren't canonicalizing or configured properly, or your alt tag may need some changing, and so this will appear in one of these reports. Now you can obviously search for this right now. Otherwise, we're posting a link to the blog post on DeepCrawl that will show you exactly where you can find this excerpt from the July 7th Search Console session. Sorry, Google Webmasters Hangout session. What am I saying? So what are these reports? They're divided into two reports, obviously. So, and you can see them appear here. Your mobile or AMP pages with desktop search clicks, or your desktop pages with mobile search clicks. You can easily find them using the find reports that search function that we have in DeepCrawl by simply typing any of the keywords that appear here. Now, in DeepCrawl's case, and you can see all the screenshots that I'll show you over here are based on our very own website. There were none of these pages essentially were badly configured. Now, it doesn't mean that might never be the case, and this is really something that we want to stress as often as we can. It's not because your pages might be doing well today that you don't have to monitor them, because you never know what might happen, especially if you're working within an organization where several people have access to your website. So one of the things you can see that I've done over here is using the Task Manager feature, which I'm currently showing you with my mouse. It's these in the top right-hand corner, the silhouette of these three people. That's our Task Manager. You can create a new task and essentially prepare yourself for any sort of issues with the configuration of your mobile or your desktop pages. And what you can do is essentially write out an email to the developer who you know will have to take a look at this, so that as soon as your crawl, and preferably it's scheduled so that you don't have to worry and think about auditing or taking a look at your crawl. But as soon as we identify any pages within that report, that person, in this case, let's call him John, will receive an email with specific instructions on what needs to be done, and then John will also receive an email as well as you when the crawl is run again, showing them what's been fixed as well. And this essentially brings us to this other use case, which is the possibility of using DeepCrawl to identify issues before Google actually sees them. And this has been sort of a theme that's surrounded DeepCrawl from the very beginning. And that's something that you can really take advantage of, and I know many of you do, is scheduling some crawls to be run on a regular basis. Now, it doesn't have to be weekly, but depending on your different projects, and I'll outline some of the different projects that I'd recommend running, being able to generate that automated data so that you can flag any issues along the way without really having to check in on DeepCrawl whenever these crawls are completed. And so you can actually see this over here. I've created 5 tasks. The top one is the one that I was just showing you earlier, sort of preparing myself for the eventuality that I might have some possibly incorrect canonical or alt tag configuration on these mobile pages. But you can see I've got a few others there as well, and I can essentially monitor them. So I'll receive an email every time the crawl is run, showing me what's going on with these reports, showing me with time as well, as you start running more and more crawls, showing me trend data and graphs as well, which will allow you to spot any issues much faster than if you were to go into the page itself. Another use case is using DeepCrawl, again with the integration linked up, to highlight any pages that might be frustrating to certain users. Now, in this, what I would do here is really take advantage of DeepCrawl's custom extraction capabilities. For those of you who might not really understand how DeepCrawl works, we're essentially a scraper, but once we've scraped all this information that we know to look out for, we analyze and produce these reports to make your lives hopefully a little easier along the way. But that doesn't mean that we know exactly what to look for. Let's say, for example, you want to know the price of every product that you have. You can actually write a regex string that'll scrape that information from your pages, and this will essentially allow you to remove any of these pages that might be frustrating. Let's say, for example, there's a price missing, or you've got out of stock pages. That'll be crucial information, not just for yourself as an SEO, but also for other members of your team. And I know that many of our customers, and I know some of them are on this call, have actually used this capability and received requests from colleagues asking them to pick out prices or maybe out of stock pages for competitors as well. Depending on your strategy, you might run some crawls for competitor analysis, and picking out of stock pages is incredibly valuable there as well. If you're unfamiliar with regex, regular expression, and you'd like help in writing these strings, please feel free to contact us using the support function in the top right-hand corner, or emailing your account manager. We're all still learning, but we've learned how to write a few regex strings by now. So feel free to ask us. So another thing, and this is one of the things I mentioned during the setup, is using the exclude and the include rules to essentially customize 2 different crawls. And this is one of the use cases that I'm presenting here is 2 crawls. One that excludes your brand queries, so you want to pick out any traffic that you're getting from non-branded queries. And this crawl you might want to run on a regular basis. And here, what I've done is I've run it on a weekly basis, because these are essentially my most valuable pages, as many of you will know by now. They're pages that you've really poured enough time and effort to make sure that they rank for non-branded search queries. The other one, and this is really a complementary one, so because you still want to monitor some of your branded queries as well, is a crawl that you can run maybe on a monthly basis that only includes your branded queries. And you can see that I've done here over here with this example of the DeepCrawl crawl. I've excluded DeepCrawl as a query in my weekly crawl, so that I can really get so I can get non-branded queries. And then you can see that my monthly crawl only includes DeepCrawl queries, so I can still monitor these maybe less valuable pages, but still important nonetheless. What we then have are you can crawl your pages which get traffic from image searches. As I've said, this is a feature that which we're making finishing touches to, that will come in the next 2 weeks, I'm told. This will essentially allow you to pick out and analyze the pages that where you're getting traffic from image searches. This happens more frequently than we can actually imagine, so it is worth setting a crawl aside where you can run image searches. Another thing you can do, another use case, is identifying your orphan pages within with search traffic. these pages essentially are pages that are driving traffic or that are driving impressions to your properties, but were not found to be linked internally around your website. High-value pages, essentially pages that are ranking well enough to be generating that traffic or these impressions, but aren't linked on your site. They could benefit from a very easy boost by linking them internally on the site and passing a bit more authority to them, and being able to rank higher in the future as well. And you can find this information. You can see it, laid out quite visually. Out of our 202 orphan pages, they're broken down on the left into different sources. So you can see that 197 of them are from Search Console, whereas 38 are from backlinks. Again, a very important source. If you haven't taken advantage of integrating backlink data, do make sure to do that. We also have a very useful blog that outlines how you can do that using data from Majestic or Ahrefs. Then we still have one more, or maybe even two use cases. I believe that might actually be our last use case, but this is the ability to identify pages that aren't driving your search impressions. And you can see here in my example from our DeepCrawl report, there were a total of 42 pages that were both indexable but not driving any search impressions. Now that's slightly worrying, of course. Like proportionally, that's a very low number and low figure, but taking a look at some of these pages, I identified a lot of paginated pages there. So what I was able to do is take advantage of our filtering capabilities. And again, bear in mind, you can always create custom reports using these filters by saving these filters using the Task Manager feature. But what I've done here, and I've done this afterwards, saved this as a task. What I've done is I've excluded pages that contain paginations. So I've identified that basically what all of these pages had were canonical pointing, were self-referencing canonical, but they were paginated. So what I've done is I've removed them, and as a result, I was able to narrow down the data to 5 pages. 5 of my indexable pages don't have any search impressions, and I can take a look, and in fact, because there are only 5, I can actually take a look at each and every one of them individually, and obviously try to get a better understanding as to why they're not driving any impressions. Maybe their deep rank is particularly low, and you can see actually from that our deep rank over here is 0.07 out of one of the 5. So worth investigating, and again creating a task so that you can be more reactive and in fixing these later on. And with that, I'll open the floor to some questions. I've seen my screen pop up with some questions. So let's take a look. So does pulling GSC data increase crawl time? From David Portney. Hey David, good to connect, although this is very one-sided. I hope we'll have a chance to speak in the next few days. It won't, but to answer your question, it won't increase crawl time. If anything, it's just an added source. So what we'll do is we'll try to analyze these at the same time. Basically, it might add a few seconds or a few minutes, but if you don't have, if you've got any orphans, it might actually take a little longer, just because we'll have to crawl them. But in theory, if you don't have orphans and if they truly overlap, then it shouldn't add much more than a few seconds to the crawl time. David also asks, where do you add Google account in the existing project? So let me show you right here. So you can simply most of you have probably already connected to the Google Analytics integration that's found just below. You might need to reconnect your account quite simply by clicking Add Google Account. Once you've done that, the Add Google Account button will stay, but you will find the list of projects, the list of domains appearing here, which means you won't need to worry about adding the account again. David, let me know if I haven't answered your question, and I'll be sure to answer via email as well. Do we have any other questions? It appears as though we don't, which I'll take this as a success. If you do have any further questions, feel free to email us. And essentially, if you're unaware of who your account manager is as well, you can email success@deepcrawl.com, and we'll be sure to pick it up from there and to write back. If you have any questions or any issues with the tool itself, we're very keen to hear from you as well. Please do make sure to contact support, and we will look into any issues you might have, whether it be with the integration or with that, or just with DeepCrawl in general. We'll also, as I said earlier, we'll share any all of the resources that we've prepared for the integration, written by my colleagues in product, and these are quite useful, and you'll notice that I will have shaped most of this webinar around these, so you can always use them to reference anything I've mentioned here today. All right, well, that's it on my end. I wish every one of you a great day, evening, or morning, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Cheers.